Filming.
Okay. You know, there's been so many things exciting that's happened in my life, and all of them are God. All, you know, the good things have always been a result of God, and the bad things God has always brought me out of. And so it's an amazing thing. You know, people, a lot of people don't understand how God loves us and what He wants for us. But I was, as long as I remember, I was a Christian. I was a Catholic. My family was all Catholic. But I had this special relationship with Jesus when I was a little boy, and I used to talk to Him, and my brothers said they haven't had that same relationship. But I did. From the time I was little, God just had His hand on me for some reason, and so. But you know, as a typical Catholic of those days in the early '60s, I lived like hell in high school. You know, drinking, fighting, doing all the stupid things kids do, just dumb. And but all my friends labeled me my name preacher, because I was always talking about the Lord. So you know, I was a little confused, obviously, by what was going on. But then, you know, one of the big traumatic things that happened to me is I was drafted out of college in my second year, which wasn't supposed to happen. And when I went in, I was put in the 101st Airborne Division and sent to Vietnam and lived in the jungle for a year. I'm just going to tell you one story, because I really want to talk about the business end of what's going on with what God has done. But the one story that Jeff had put in the thing, we were 45 men trying to go take up this hill. And we've been trying to take it for several days. And I was in the first chopper that went in, and a bunch of guys got killed beside me, but I didn't. And so then we were in a big firefight, and they were dug into we were in a triple canopy jungle, the thickest jungle there is in the United States, or in the world, into this mountain. And they had tunnels through the mountains that had been there since they were fighting the French. They had hospitals in this mountain, they had all kinds of stuff down in the mountain. So every time we'd hit the stuff, we'd call in the jets from the Gulf of Tonkin, and they come in and blow up the area. Well, that didn't hurt anybody. They come right out of the mountain. So anyway, this went on for 3 or 4 days. And so one night, they thought they were going to really get them, and they had the ships in the Gulf of Tonkin firing the 16-inch guns, which were like 500-pound bombs when they hit. And it was shaking the mountain all night. I couldn't even sleep. We just were up all night. And then a group of my buddies went up, a squad that I wasn't in, went up and got hit right away, and one of my best friends was shot between the eyes, and you know, my squad was called to go up and get them out of it, and we pulled them back. And so then the CO was really mad, and he brought in all the jets with napalm and bombs, and I mean, this area, you wouldn't think anybody could survive the noise. We pulled back and they hit this area. Well, then the CO called my lieutenant, who was an airborne ranger, and said, I want you to take 4 men and go and recon that area. And so he selected me as one of the guys, and I said, I'm not going. He said, what do you mean you're not going? And I said, LT, they're just waiting for us, as they have every day. They're in the mountain for that strike. They're out there waiting for us. We're going to get killed. And he said, well, Dick, you want to get court-martialed? I said, no. And then the other guys chimed in and said, we don't want to go either. Now, this was untypical of us, because we were fighters. We had been fighting a long time. But this was suicide, is the way I saw it. I'm not going to give my life for this hill, is what I told the lieutenant. He said, what do you want me to do? I said, call the CO and tell them we don't want to go. He said, well, I'll try. So he called the CO and told them we wouldn't go, and the CO said, you get those guys up there. We've nailed them. You guys go. So, all right, then we knew we had to go. So we went, and we went up there, and by the time we got to the airstrike, Smitty, our point man, was a former Hell's Angel biker in the United States. He was at walking point, and he went up into the jungle on the other side of the burned out, smoldering area from the napalm. And we were all spread apart, but we went out into the napalm area, and it was just smoldering and clear, jungle all around us. And then the machine gun opened up on Smitty, we heard him scream. So we don't leave anybody behind, so everybody went running through fire and got up there to find Smitty. Well, Smitty had jumped off the ridge line with his head shot open, and crawled behind us. We didn't know it because we were in jungle. Well, by the time I got to the LT, I heard this explosion, and he had his arm blown off. The lieutenant who was the airborne ranger, he had his arm held off, and he picked it up with his other hand and started to run. I said, "Get down!" and right through the neck. And so LT was killed, and we didn't know where Smitty was, and so it was just two of us now, and we were surrounded by probably 100 enemy, and they were coming at us from all sides and firing. There was no way to live through that. The bullets just kept hitting everywhere around me, but not me. And God had his hand there. It's the only way it could have happened. And I was crying. I was just crying, just yelling to the Lord, "Father, get me out of here. I'm your man," And he did. Then they put me on a medevac because I did get blown up. They threw a grenade at me. I threw it back. Then they threw a satchel charge at me. I picked it up. And I went for the satchel charge, and before I got to it, it went off and blew me up in the air about 5 feet, and I came down, looked to see if I had my arms and my legs, and I did, so I picked up my gun and started firing again. And they finally broke through to us, because we'd been surrounded, and they couldn't get through to us at first. And there was just the two of us guys left, plus the wounded guys, so, well, the lieutenant was dead. So I took Smitty, who was bleeding from the top of his head, we found him, and we headed down through the jungle, and they surrounded us 2 other times. We had big firefights, just 6 or 7 of us trying to hold them off. We finally got to the LZ, the landing zone, and they brought the medevacs in and put me on a medevac, and it crashed on the way to the hospital. So May 9th, 1970 was a tough day, I'll tell you. And, but then I tell people, well, maybe it wasn't so tough, because God had his hand on me and brought me through that kind of thing. And all I had was eardrums that were sort of blown, and they healed pretty quick. So, so many of these stories of Vietnam, they go on and on. When you're in combat for a year, you can imagine. This was 2 or 3 days. So I came home, and shortly after, about a year later, I met my wife, Jackie, and she was. I was trying to fit in. I'd gone to California for almost a year, back from Vietnam. My uncle had a company out there, and I went to work for him out there and grew my hair long out in California. I was trying to fit in with everybody. I had hair down to here, Fu Manchu, back from Vietnam. And I just realized this is what I want. I want to get back to school, so I went back to Ohio, got back at Miami University where I'd started. And then I started working construction in the day and being a bartender at night at a college bar. So this is how I was earning my money. So Jackie, who was working at Standard Oil in the daytime, she took a barmaid job at night. And the first night she walked in, I looked at her. I said, "Oh my gosh." I said, and she came up and I asked her out that night, and she always said, "I always regretted going out with you that first night." But so anyway, I asked her out, and 4 weeks later, I asked her to marry me. And 4 weeks after that, we were married. We've been married for almost 46 years now. So. And she's my best friend. She's she's put up with me with so much. She's just a sweetheart. I had hair. I was into drugs. I smoked marijuana heavily for 8 years, heavily. And then I got in the music business. Just after we were married, we had 2 little boys, and I ended up some friends of mine started a record store and head shop in Dayton, Ohio, on Main Street, and it was big time. Everybody would go there that was in that, the counterculture. Everybody was in that. This store was this big. Well, the guy that I went to school with, who was the president of that company, his father was the president of Pitney Bowes, and also the president of one of the big banks in town. He's a very wealthy man. And so Tom had never worked a day in his life. But anyway, he comes after me and asks me if I would be his general manager of the store. And I said, "Well, okay, what are you going to pay me?" And he told me. I said, "Yeah, I'll go." So I went and I started running this store. I didn't know a thing about it. My best friend was the record buyer then. We were all going to school together. Well, Rory knew how the music. He was a great record buyer, but I started taking over the business end. And nobody had been keeping records. His partner had bought an airplane. I mean, he was embezzling big time. Well, I started, and he kept no books. I kept asking for the books, and he wouldn't show them to me. Well, there weren't any. And so I had to go by getting sales receipts from the cash register. And I put those together for the whole years that they'd been in before I came in. And I went to him and I said, where's this money? I said, your guy's ripping you off, buddy. You need to fire him. So he fired his partner, who was a minor partner, and I bought in. And so I became half owner of it. Well, then I built, as manager, because Tom was never there, I opened up 5 more stores over about a 2-year period. And pretty soon, I was like a celebrity because I was on all the radio stations every day. This is Dick McBain from the Goldenrod, you know, and announcing all the music. And we brought all the big concert bands into town. We practically made Bachman Turner Overdrive with Taking Care of Business. A lot of you may know that song. This is before anybody knew them. We brought them in and we promoted them. And we, you know, I'd be sitting up, I had my own private box, and we'd sit up over the stage in the Palace Theater when we bring all these big bands to town, and people look at us as much as the others, because there's those guys that own Goldenrod, you know. And my wife would sit up there and just shake her head. She says, you know, Dick, the only people think you're a big shot are druggies. I'd say, Jackie always tells the truth. I'd say, oh, Jackie, don't keep saying that. But she was right. So I finally realized I had to come back to the Lord. I mean, he was always in my heart. I mean, I'd never walked away from him. I still loved the Lord. I was just living like hell, you know, and running, basically, from God is what I was doing. So I finally went to my wife and I said, you know what we need in our life? We need God back in our lives. She said, no, you need God back in your life. I've got him, you know. I said, all right, you're right. And we had 2 little boys then. So I called the board of directors together of the 5 stores, and we had some millionaire Jewish businessmen on the board of directors. And I said, they said, Dick, why did you call this meeting together? I said, I'm leaving. And they said, what do you mean? We're just starting to make big money all of a sudden. You know, you've been building these stores in the red for 5 years. Now you're going to be able to taste the fruits of it. I said, I'm going to make this short and sweet. Jesus Christ is the reason. And they sat back because they're Jewish, these millionaires. And they said, oh, we thought you were serious. I said, I am serious. You know, they couldn't believe that I would. And I just gave it up. I didn't take any money. I just left. And I had joined Full Gospel about a month earlier. And all my Full Gospel friends would come and say, man, you gave up, you just walked out of your business for the Lord. Boy, are you going to get blessed. You're going to get... Instead, I went just the other way. Went into financial ruin. 3 house payments behind. I had to go and sell new cars, as I couldn't find a way to do what I was doing at the time, and certainly at the level. But God started blessing me in the car business, you know. And I was just as honest as, you know, people could come to me and really know they were getting an honest deal, you know, and God prospered me. So, you know, there were things, I needed 3 house payments immediately. And they called me up and told me they were going to take your house. And of course, house payments back then were nothing. I lived in a relatively nice house, but house payment was $205 a month or something back in those days. And so but I owed 3 of them. And so I went into my work at the dealership, and I had an office facing the front big windows, and I went in before the dealership was open. And I went into my cubicle, and I'm facing out. There's nobody there. I put my head down on my arms and on my table, and I said, Father, they're going to take the house. I got 2 babies. You got to do something, Lord. I don't know what to do. And someone says, are you Dick McBain? And I looked up, and the sun was coming in. All I could see is the shape of this guy. And I said, yes, I am. I'm trying to see who he is. He said, I want to buy this Corvette. I made the 3 house payments on that 1 car that day. That day. And, you know, and this kind of deliverance God has done in my life over and over and over. So I got out of that. I went to Houston to start a trucking business. And my younger brother was after me. He was down there in Houston already. He was driving the semi, and he was doing through some guy in his church. And he said, Dick, there's big business down here because this is the whole country in 1979-80 was going through this terrible recession. But Houston, everybody was saying was recession-proof because of oil and steel. So I ended up moving the family down there. I bought a semi. I said, well, Bob, I'm going to have to drive this semi for, 6 months or something, so I know what I'm talking about to start this company. And he said, that's okay, because he was already driving one. So I bought this semi, and I I started driving in that traffic in Houston in this huge semi, and that's all we did, was stayed in Houston. I didn't go on the road. So I was home every night with the kids and stuff. And, you know, I was making more money than I'd ever made in my life. And, but he kept getting cold feet about the investment to start the company. And I said, Bob, I can't drive this truck. And I was there a year and a half driving that truck. And I finally said, I'm out of this. He moved back to Ohio. I said, what? So I said, all right. So I sold the truck, and I put out my resumes. I was hired by the third largest staffing company in the United States. Temporary personnel, they called it then. Now it's staffing. And it was owned by H&R Block, who I've met and known. And I was hired as the branch manager for Houston, Texas. And there was one labor pool in Houston. You know, the street dregs come in from sleeping on the street and smell, and they're smoking. It looked like a city mission every morning. And I come out there, and when I took the job, when I saw that, when I pulled up front, the guy who was going to hire me said, now, when you see the guys out there sleeping on the sidewalk on cardboard and stuff, don't drive away. Come in and talk to me. So I pulled up, and sure enough, guys sleeping on the sidewalk, just looking bad, you know. And so I said, okay, Lord, I hear you. So I went in, took the job. I started praying in front of the 100 men every morning. Guys didn't like that. I invited them. They could go out. You don't have to listen if you don't want. More and more would stay. At first, they'd go out and smoke their cigarettes, but they'd come back in. And I bought some clothes with my own money and started getting these guys cleaned up before I'd send them out on a job. And then I tried to get them into the, you know, the rundown hotels, but off the street. And and I put a sign up on the wall that said, "Welcome to the best workers in Houston, Texas." And they started getting pride about themselves. And these guys were coming off the street and becoming cleaned up, and people were calling me saying, "Dick, these are the best workers I ever had. Where'd you find them?" I said, "Those are the same guys you didn't want 2 weeks ago, you know, that you were telling me, get rid of this guy." He said, "Well, what did you do?" I said, "Nothing, just give them a little self-respect, which they all deserve." So we started building it that way. It was God. This was God. Well, 6 months, the recession hit Houston, and so while the rest of the country was coming back, Houston was going down the tubes. So my first 6 months with this company, our sales just, even though I was helping the guys, business was going down badly. And so I